one of the most popular Star Wars characters of the modern era, has finally gotten her own series, and the first 2 episodes have premiered on Disney+. But rather than blowing our minds, Ahsoka just has us feeling okay. So let's talk about why. What's up, Nerdgenic Nation and Star Wars enthusiasts? Aaron Waller here, and today I want to give my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of the Ahsoka series on Disney+. And typically we would live stream these new shows week by week, but considering how they've just sort of been okay or disappointing as of late, we decided to go back to a video formula such as this one, and I'm kind of glad that we did. Ahsoka takes place after the fall of the Galactic Empire, and sees former Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano investigating an emerging threat to a vulnerable galaxy with the help of some old and familiar friends. The series stars Rosario Dawson reprising her role that she played in both The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett, and as much as I know that she's a fan favorite casting of this character, I never really wanted to see a standalone Ahsoka series in my personal opinion, especially in live action. But once the Rebels crew got mixed in, I was obviously a lot more intrigued. And speaking of which, in the first 2 episodes we also get Sabine, Hera, Chopper, and a hologram of Ezra. And to be honest, it was pretty great seeing all these characters from Rebels, but something I couldn't quite shake is how simultaneously they felt the same, but very different than their animated counterparts. And maybe that's because the story takes place years after Rebels in the original trilogy, so these characters are obviously much more seasoned and very different people than they once were, but there are still remnants of those that we had fallen in love with. Sabine still marches to the beat of her own drum, Hera is still leading and trying to push people together in her very gentle manner, and Chopper is just as snarky as always. Though we do need more Chopper, I'll just go ahead and say that right now. And though we may still be missing some major players, i.e. Grand Admiral Thrawn, who I don't hope that they spend 80% of the season just trying to get him involved, as we know that he will be as we've seen him in the trailers, we do get some new interesting characters in the late Ray Stevenson's Baylan Skoll and his Padawan, as well as a Jedi Professor droid Huyang, who's voiced by David Tennant, and all of which are very interesting in their own rights. For Baylan, he's a Jedi-trained mercenary of sorts, and seems to be on neither the side of the Jedi or the Sith from what I can tell, and yet he follows his very morally gray Jedi code. His Padawan, on the other hand, Shin Hati, who I got Chloe Grace Moretz's Hit Girl vibes from, seems to be on the more hot-headed side of things. So if she succumbs to the dark side or becomes Thrawn's own pawn, it definitely wouldn't surprise me. And then there's Huyang, who like K2SO from Rogue One is kind of refreshing that they have some humor to them and aren't necessarily there just to serve the purpose of filling in gaps in exposition, kind of like a certain protocol droid we may know. But I don't foresee his character lasting very long in this series for some reason, as Dave Filoni seems to have the knack of killing off any droid except Chopper. And he better not even think about doing that, especially since he's the voice of him. But beside the Rebels feeling a bit odd, that just isn't the only thing. For example, some of the visuals right out of the gate had me questioning what I was watching. The entire opening portion of Ahsoka in the temple and Baylan boarding a ship felt very much like I was watching a mashup of Indiana Jones and Star Trek rather than Star Wars. And some of the set dressings and visuals felt almost too polished. Like Dave Filoni spent a little too much time in the animation realm, where things could look a certain way and don't necessarily have to be nearly as dirty or lived in as what would appear in animation. But when adapting those elements into live action, it almost feels a bit odd, but at the same time you can see the influence and appreciate it, so I'm kind of undecided on that. But what has to be probably the biggest point of contention for me comes in the first episode cliffhanger and into the second episode involving Sabine and Hati having a lightsaber duel. Don't get me wrong, the duel felt decent, but it felt like it had no real emotion to it, which is a similar situation in episode 2 with Ahsoka fighting off Hati and an Inquisitor. The Sabine fight was supposed to be about her wielding Ezra's weapon for the first time in years and Hati being angry and on her solo mission, and yet when the two come together, their battle felt lifeless. And then to put the cherry on top of that, Sabine takes a lightsaber to the stomach and freaking lives, which is absolutely insane considering that Qui-Gon Jinn found himself in a very similar situation and yet he's dead. Hashtag justice for Qui-Gon. But overall, the series is feeling just sort of okay so far. As a fan of Rebels, it feels like the show and has a lot of the same characters, locations, creatures, and the like, but it somehow suffers from trying too hard to adapt a look and thus the story falters. Which is a shame because the story seems like it has a lot of good elements to it, like those still loyal to the Empire, visually stunning yet lifeless battles, and the build up to what could ultimately be a great Star Wars adventure and the return of Thrawn and possibly yet another galactic war. I don't necessarily think the series should be praised for changing Star Wars in either a positive or negative way, or at least not as of yet, because it's still just expanding on what we've already seen in Rebels, which in itself is a double-edged sword. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I hope that it ends up being terrible either. I want this series to be good, But when we have what seems to be fairly severe course correcting right out of the gate, it's a little bit concerning. But regardless, I'm going to try and remain optimistic for next week and the rest of the series, and will continue to be parked in front of my screen at 9 PM every Tuesday night for the next couple weeks. For now though, those are my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka, and now I want to hear from you in the Nerdgenic community. How are you feeling about the show based on these first 2 episodes? Are you excited for what's to come? Are you watching just for Thrawn, or are you even watching at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos, as well as my thoughts on the next episode of Ahsoka. But also make sure you follow us across all social media platforms at Nerdgenic. That way you don't miss out on any special news, announcements, or articles at nerdgenic.com. But in the meantime, if you want even more video content from us, check out my thoughts on a potential Ahsoka reveal right over here, or for more Star Wars content, check out this playlist right over here. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope to see you in the next video, and may the Force be with you.